when you see something work successfully, it then tends to get done to death.
Everyone jumps on it. Make sure you're not doing what everyone else is doing.
Journalists are getting heavily spammed.
I wanted it to be so bad. I left a lot of money on the table. I'm very happy to leave that to kind of someone else. I was struggling at the time to kind of find a girlfriend. All these girls wanting to date me. And then the billboard cost me a bit of money too, but I managed to make that back. I did actually get a girlfriend from it. But when you know why something works or doesn't work,
how do you actually stand out?
The cure for spammy campaigns is
people fear that they are not going to land anything from it, and it's wasted.
You could put a lot of work in compiling a lot of data, and if it's not an interesting story, it just falls flat.
Just hate the idea of taking someone's money and them just getting nothing in return. The journalists are getting tons and tons of pitches, pure garbage, or maybe AI kind of created or generated.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today, I am really excited to be joined by Mark Rofe, a digital PR strategist, business owner, and creator of some of the industry's most memorable campaigns. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Mark, it's great to have you on. Let's start with your background. You have a very interesting background. You own a Christmas tree farm. You worked at Rise at 7. So to start, why don't you tell us that and how you got into digital PR?
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of rewind a bit further from that, I think I created my first website when I was like 16, and it was like voucher code affiliate website. And I just had visions in my mind that, I was going to make tons of money. It was going to be great. And it just didn't happen really. And one of the first things I realized, I was like, oh, no one is like finding my website. So I kind of led me down the path a little bit of SEO. And then I realized that with SEO, you need links to rank, which eventually led me down the path of doing PR. So that's kind of how I got into PR. My first role within PR was, as you kind of like alluded to, was like Rise at 7. And yeah, just kind of went on from there really. And I do think now that I've had a little bit of experience with SEO and PR, I do think PR is where all the fun is at.
Yeah, 100%. So you said you've got your first foray into PR then was for your voucher code website. So were you doing this on your own before you took like an actual PR position at Rise?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. It was like a horrendously, if I looked at the website now, like anything you do when you've done it in the past, it's just like a long time ago. This is probably in about maybe 2006, maybe 2007. I didn't even know how to put a website on a domain name. So it was on like a blog spot kind of like URL. It was terrible, but I think little things like that, you just make little bits of, advances. Maybe I then learned how to put a website on a domain, and then I learned about how to do a little bit about keyword research and kind of taking things on from there. You just get a little bit better and better with kind of practice, don't you? So yeah, that's kind of how it came about. At that point in time, I wasn't doing any PR at all, very early on. And especially back then, I was doing what people were doing, which is just buying links. I wasn't spending a lot, but I needed some links. I didn't have the skills required to kind of buy them. But then that eventually led me down the path of, doing PR and naturally kind of earning links without paying for them.
And then at what point did you start a Christmas tree business? I think that is quite an interesting business to get into.
So I've dabbled with like domain names for a little bit, and I saw christmastrees.co.uk come up for sale on like a domain auction platform. It's called like Domain Law. And I saw that and I thought, oh, that doesn't sell. If that doesn't go for too high, I'll be interested in that. I'll have a go. I'll take that. And I would love to try and do something with that kind of one day. And so, yeah, I bought it, and I must have bought it at Christmas 2019, because not long afterwards, the pandemic kind of set in. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, we might have a situation here where come Christmas time, people may not be able to leave the house and, go ahead and buy their Christmas trees. And so I thought I would kind of time it with that. And that's when I launched the website and the business. So yeah, that's kind of how it started out really. It almost worked a little bit too well. So the farm where I actually sourced my trees from, they sold out. We sold out before December, which was great in some ways, but also terrible in other ways, because I left a lot of money on the table basically.
Have you scaled that out now then? Have you bought your own land, or are you still like sourcing and selling via the website?
I've not scaled it out where I've purchased my own land, or I'm growing my own trees. I think that I'm very happy to leave that to kind of someone else who knows more about doing that kind of side of things. And I'm more on kind of the e-commerce and the marketing side of things. I think one thing that I did want to do that when I was younger. I think I probably should explain that. I had visions when I was like a kid of like owning my own kind of like Christmas tree farm. And to be honest, it was probably me being a bit lazy. I just thought, I could just grow these Christmas trees and then, chop them down at Christmas and just make a ton of money. But there's an awful lot more that kind of goes into that I just had no idea. Like actually the trees kind of need looking after quite a bit throughout the year, whether there's like being fertilized or whether that's kind of being pruned and kind of trimmed. And also they take a long time to grow. I think it takes between 8 to 12 years to kind of grow them. So like I said, I'm very happy to leave that kind of side of things with someone else while I kind of look after the e-commerce side, really.
When you said you wanted to do this since you were younger, is this when you were little boy Mark?
Exactly.
Like wide-eyed Christmas, and you were thinking, oh, that's awesome.
I just thought, I went and got some, picked up our Christmas tree, and I saw the person who owned the land kind of selling. I thought, oh, this looks good. Like, you only have to work a few weeks of the year, and then you're sorted. I think that was kind of what was going through my mind. But like I said, there's way more that goes into it than just that.
I think marketer and tree farmer are two very different skill sets.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about another one of your projects that I think is very interesting, and that is finding a girlfriend. So you have your campaign, Dating Mark. Can you tell us about that? Was there a marketing play on that, or was it really just to find a girlfriend?
Looking back now, so I was with my friend Josh in the pub, so I don't know if Josh is going to listen to this. Maybe I'll send it to him, but he knows the story anyway, right? Yeah. So it's hard to imagine when you kind of, when you see my face and how I look. I was struggling at the time to kind of find a girlfriend or go on some dates. And I kind of just said something, and he was struggling as well. And we were in the pub, and I just kind of said to him, we might as well just, put ourselves on like a billboard or something. And then he laughed. And whenever I share like an idea or something with someone and it gets that kind of reaction, I don't know, I think I just go into like another mode, and I just think like, oh, he found that funny. Maybe I should actually do that. And Josh is one of my friends who kind of then just like egged me on and said, yeah, you should do it. Yeah, you should do it. And it was almost, I did do it with like a genuine purpose to try and find like a date. There was also that side of it where I just thought it would be kind of potentially a funny thing to do as well. And I remember designing the whole thing and doing it all. And I was just very conscious of the fact that I wanted it to be so bad that it was almost good. That was kind of my approach with it. And it may sound strange kind of hearing this if you haven't seen it, but do maybe try and go check it out, because it is in like, I'm doing a ridiculous pose and it's in like Comic Sans, and the website itself has got loads of like ridiculous information on there. But
yeah, it's very well done, I think.
Yeah, I didn't want to come across as like a sad kind of loser. So I thought if I came across as like, a funny, sad loser, at least that wouldn't be so bad. And it
be more endearing.
A bit naive, but it just took off like way more than I kind of expected. Like, I think the word like viral can be used quite loosely sometimes. Maybe someone does a TikTok and it gets like 20,000 views and they say they've gone viral, but this really did kind of go everywhere. It was on like, I was on like BBC News. I was on like This Morning with Holly and Phil at the time. So there was that. It made it over to the US as well. I was on the Ellen show, and then the late night show with Jimmy Fallon. And then I can always tell when it kind of just went somewhere, because I was just on my Instagram, I'd just be getting suddenly loads of views of like my stories from like some like random country. Like, and I had it once with like Germany, and I just messaged a couple of people. I'm like, by the way, like, how did you find my profile or something like that? And one of them said, oh, you were just an answer on like a German TV quiz show. So, that happened as well. Honestly, it was, I will never do anything ever again that kind of go as crazy as that. And I think I came out of that experience, and I think it worked quite well for me, because at the end of it, people thought I was good at PR. So I'll carry on letting them think that, because all I really did was buy a billboard, right? All these people, all these girls kind of like wanting to date me, which I thought was good as well. And then the billboard cost me a bit of money too, but I managed to make that back, and not a lot, by the way, but through some kind of media appearances as well. So overall, it kind of worked quite well. And I did actually get a girlfriend from it, although things didn't really work out.
I was going to say, is that
yeah, things didn't really work out, but that's the same whether I'd found a relationship with or without that. These things kind of happen.
I think you're selling yourself short there, because I think it's very well written where it's funny. I think if you would have been like boastful, it would have been really cringy, but you read it and it's really funny. So I think that works. To date, it has 2,363 applications. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I had to pause it because I was like, this is just getting ridiculous now. There's going to be someone in this lot that that I like and hopefully like me too. So yeah, I remember thinking that, but also I didn't really know what the reaction was going to be when I did it. So I didn't know if, like, I was living in Sheffield at the time, but I purposely did things in case it just like completely backfired. Like, I'm wearing sunglasses, so like maybe you can't identify me if you kind of saw me out in the street. I was living in Sheffield, but I put it up in Manchester so that it wouldn't be exactly kind of the area that I was living at the time. So yeah, I kind of put some of those things in place, and luckily I think for me the majority of the kind of reaction was, I would say, like 99% positive. And whenever you do something like that where you do put yourself out there, you are going to naturally get some hate as well. But for what I'd done, like, there was hardly any of that. Like a little bit, but not a lot, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, you're known for your creative and sometimes unconventional campaigns. I'm wondering, first, did you have a sense of how successful this one would be? And has that allowed you some insight for your future ideations of campaigns in the PR space?
So I think it wasn't until I made my course. So I've got like an online course that I sell, teaches people how to do digital PR. And it wasn't until I made that really forced me to think like why things work and maybe why things don't. And I think that the why is something that is missed quite a lot from anyone that is kind of doing PR, any type of PR really, because I think a lot of people are everyone is kind of guessing, right? We're doing our best guess. But when you know why something works or doesn't work, you're able to kind of guess a little bit better about whether something's going to work or not. Basically, to answer your question, I think I just got a much better idea of why something has worked or why it hasn't.
Do you think this is like a blueprint? Because I think we've seen this with companies as well. They create like products that are bizarre. Like we had a brewery that created a pickle flavored beer, and like some just really bizarre things, and they're mostly publicity stunts. Not so much on the backlink purpose, but just the exposure. Do you think that's like a good blueprint that most companies could actually follow without pimping out their employees on billboards?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a little bit. So kind of similar to what you were saying, there's a company, Brewdog, and they kind of do similar things like that as well. I think as long as you don't overdo it, I think it can work quite well. Problem is, if you do it too much, it then kind of it becomes inauthentic, and I think then the impact is reduced. The problem with Brewdog, and I can't remember the exact ones that they were doing, but they were kind of just jumping onto any campaign. Maybe it was kind of a charitable one or whatever. And I think when you do that, you just have to look at the optics. Like if they are doing something that looks like it's for a good cause, well, actually they're just jumping on everything. Maybe they don't really care about that, and it is all just about getting them and getting coverage for themselves. So yes, I think it can work. And it's going to work for for certain types of companies more than others, right? Maybe if it's something like a doctor, maybe you don't want your doctor doing kind of, or, silly kind of campaigns like this. What I'm talking about, like, kind of serious stuff, or maybe like a pension company, but who knows? Maybe if it's done in the right way, those types of things could work. But yeah, I think it lends itself to certain niches and industries more than others, basically.
I think there has to be some originality to it as well. Even if the feeling that it can bring about, or you talked about drilling down the reason why something has worked. I think that reason is normally like an emotional reaction to what is being seen. But when you see something work successfully, it then tends to get done to death, doesn't it? Across multiple industries by multiple PRs, and then it no longer becomes like a viable, workable strategy. But what you're trying to get is that response, isn't it? I think that's the part of the campaign magic that resonates with people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's anything that kind of, like I said, when I told my friend Josh the idea and I saw it, he laughed. That emotional reaction gave me a feeling that I was kind of onto the right thing, or onto something there, basically. And it is all just about getting some kind of emotional reaction. And yeah, as you said, especially kind of in the world of SEO, I think SEO's we ruin everything, don't we? Like, if there's a tactic that works, everyone jumps on it, and then suddenly it just doesn't really work anymore, like when you've got too many people doing it. So yeah, I'd agree with you 100%.
Well, and a lot of people think that's the current state of digital PR. SEOs have come into the space. You have people who have been doing, digital PR, traditional PR for decades, long before SEOs became interested. Now SEOs come in, journalists are getting heavily spammed, the industry is changing. I guess my question is, how do you think you stand out now? How, like, there's a lot of noise. How do you actually stand out? Do you think SEOs will ruin digital PR?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we've seen a bit of kind of a boom in the last few years. And I remember kind of saying at the time, I think I said something along the lines of like, basically the cure for these kind of spammy campaigns is spammy campaigns. And sorry, it was thunder there. I don't know if you heard that.
I heard it.
The cure for spammy campaigns is more spammy campaigns. And what I mean by that is these types of spammy campaigns, they're going to work up until you have too many of them and they just become less effective, and then they just stop working, at which point that people kind of maybe stop doing them. I think we're going to reach that kind of level with that soon. And I think really the way to kind of win, I suppose, would be to make sure you're not doing what everyone else is doing. Because if you're doing what everyone else is doing, then at some point that either is going to stop working, or it's just not going to be as, working as well. So maybe it's kind of leaning a little bit and kind of doing the opposite of what they're doing. And I guess just to give you one example, maybe there's expert comment kind of campaigns. I'm not kind of hating on those because I still use them. I still do them. I think they're still going to work. But maybe if everyone else is doing them, especially if it's maybe to do with like the weather, so something kind of predictable, maybe there's a freeze coming on, so anyone who's doing PR for plumbers kind of tells you how you should thaw your pipes or something like that. I think those types of campaigns are at risk of just kind of not working very well, maybe either now or kind of at some point in the future, because everyone knows that you can do that and they kind of work. So I think in terms of doing something different, it would be to maybe do stuff that's a little bit more harder. And I think people don't want to be doing stuff that's a little bit more harder because it takes more time and it costs more money. But I think that's really going to put you maybe an advantage in the future.
I think that's a great point. I think as individuals, maybe small teams looking to execute PR for a company, the problem is that risk reward ratio between something which you can give a go, like an expert tips based piece, let's say, especially, as the winter months are coming, if you've got an auto mechanic client, let's say, the whole looking after your car in the winter, defrosting windows. Yeah, you might send one out and it might not get picked up, but you could send 10 out, not much more cost, time and effort, and chances are you'll get some coverage. To being really creative, and there is so much cool stuff that you can do, obviously, but it's so much time and effort, and people fear that they are not going to land anything from it, and it's wasted. Could you talk to that? Are journalists looking for that more creative stuff? And if you do go to that time and effort to do a much more in-depth sort of data or research-based campaign, and it does fail, how would you approach that as well?
Yeah, I think those are some good questions. Your question on, a journalist looking for the kind of creative campaigns, I think I prefer to think about it a little bit differently. I tend to think of it in terms, instead of kind of creative, I tend to think of it as like, is there a story there? Because you could do something like super creative, but maybe there's just not that angle or that hook, and it doesn't really kind of make a story. So that's all journalists really care about, really. So you're going to need to have something more than just kind of creativity. It needs to have a story in there as well. So there's that. And I think to your other question, which I think was, what do you do, if it kind of doesn't work? I think even before that, it's just kind of making sure you're doing something that maybe does still have a good chance of working, which was kind of what I touched upon, which was like, the why things work and why they don't. I think that if I was to do a data kind of campaign, I would probably make sure that I do something that is maybe from like an authoritative source, maybe like one tick box for me. And the reason that I would try to do that is because automatically that gives my campaign almost like instant trust and credibility with any journalist who I kind of send it out to. So that's one thing that I'll be trying to do. The other thing is no good just having like an authoritative piece of data if it's just not interesting, or it goes back to what I said, if there just isn't a story there. So I would make sure that it's also something that is, of interest. Maybe it's of public interest. So just to really make sure that it has a high chance of kind of working. And failing that, if you're able to kind of get regional data, if it's not going to hit on the nationals, maybe you could kind of have a plan B where you could use that data to kind of go out with regionals. And then I guess as maybe a plan C, maybe have that page somewhere on your website as an asset that's optimized for those, certain types of keywords. Maybe it's like a statistic page or something like that, because maybe a journalist isn't interested in that kind of data now, but that doesn't mean they might not be searching for it kind of later on, and you might be able to pick up links, moving forward with that. So it really depends on so many things, like the type of campaign you're doing, the type of niche that you're working in. But as a general maybe kind of idea, those are maybe the 3 things that I would kind of be looking at or trying to do.
You could put a lot of work in compiling a lot of data, and if it's not an interesting story, it just falls flat. And I think a lot of times the issue is, whether it's a client or it's your boss, it's that data might be interesting to the founder or whoever is collecting it, but it's just not interesting outside of that space. And if it's a small space, it's not going to have larger news appeal oftentimes. In those kind of situations, how do you take something that could be boring and turn it into more of an interesting story?
No, I think that's a good question. So again, it depends. Maybe you've got like a survey, and the survey itself just isn't quite strong enough on its own to just be a story. You could do a couple of things. You could frame it as like an expert comment piece and kind of go out with it as an expert comment, and then use the survey as like, a secondary kind of piece of content within that story, but just kind of aids the story as well. It goes along with kind of the expert comment. For example, maybe you've done a survey on the habits of people sleeping, and you've got some data there that it's just not quite good enough for a standalone story on its own. But you could do a piece on sleep expert reveals what to do, if you're an insomniac and you just can't sleep or whatever. Got their tips in there, but then you're kind of using maybe some of the stats that you found from your survey and put it in there. That could be one thing that you could do. Another thing you could do is just turn it into like a human interest story or kind of like a case study. So sticking with the, insomniac kind of angle or example there, maybe you find someone who is an insomniac and just can't sleep, and you get them to share their story and maybe how it's impacted their life. And then you could put the stats from your survey within that story as well. I think those types of stories can work quite well because they resonate. It's very hard to resonate with a statistic, but it's a lot easier to resonate with someone else who's in the same situation as you. And I think those are why those types of stories work. Again, really depends, but just a couple of ideas on, reframing or kind of re-angling those types of campaigns, I guess.
That's great. I think as well, to speak to Nick's point a little bit, do you think that digital PR or PR is suitable for everyone? So we often are faced with the challenge of speaking to some prospective clients, let's say, that are in what one might deem to be not a particularly PR friendly niche, and have to try and explain that there needs to be some flexibility on behalf of that client, that business, that brand, in order to be newsworthy and of interest. So hence, give us the ability to make this something which can do well in the news with journalists. On the other side, do you think that journalists are getting annoyed by this approach, where we could be taking, let's say, some less perfectly aligned clients, brands, and trying to make a story that suits them, but really it's quite obvious we're trying to just get coverage and links for not a perfectly aligned client?
I see what you mean. I think, again, I'm going to say this a lot and it's probably not helpful, but it really depends. But I'll try and give an example just off the top of my head. So if you've got like a construction client, and I'm talking about like a construction client, maybe they do like kind of, they build offices or something like that. Maybe there's not really kind of many opportunities in the news cycle to kind of get coverage for that client. So as you kind of were mentioning earlier, maybe you just have to broaden the scope with what you can kind of work with. Something that I personally try to do, I'm not saying if it's right or if it's wrong, is that I just still make sure I try to stick as close as I could to whatever it is that the client does. And I don't want to kind of steer kind of too far away from it, because I just feel that that's not going to be beneficial in terms of, how I want it to be for the client. So sticking with the construction example, maybe there's just not many opportunities for getting coverage for a construction type company, but maybe there's an angle on kind of like fire safety. For example, maybe you're able to get an expert or someone in-house with your client, or maybe like a third party who is like a fire safety expert because that is going to be something that maybe is in the news cycle kind of more often, especially maybe if it's related to the cladding problems. Like I know a lot of buildings, for example, in the UK after Grenfell are kind of struggling to remove this cladding from their properties. Or maybe there's just, you've got a fire expert who just comments on, maybe this is a bad example, by the way, but it's just one off the top of my head. But, I think there's just going to be more opportunities there if you just think more broadly about the types of things that do get coverage and what you could branch out into. And to answer your question, do journalists get annoyed by that? I think it depends on the journalist, depends on how far you kind of stay away from what the original topic or theme was. I think if there's still kind of a little bit of relevancy there, then maybe not. But if it's completely like off the mark, then I wouldn't be surprised if they do get a little bit annoyed. I mean, one that I recall that was kind of shared on Twitter maybe in the last 12 to 18 months was hay fever statistics or hay fever.
I was going to bring that one up.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but something to do with like hay fever around the UK, like hay fever hotspots or something like that. And it was done by like a gambling company, and it was a bit like, yeah, I just don't see how that works. Like I just don't get the relevance at all. And do you know what? I don't work with any gambling companies, so it's very easy for me to sit here and kind of maybe say, hey, that's not kind of relevant. But it's a tough job. I understand, if you're working with a gambling niche, is to just find something that maybe is a little bit more relevant. But that was one just off the top of my head that I can remember. I
was going to bring that one up specifically because we thought, that one was too far. It made the rounds on social media, people talking about it's not relevant. And yeah, casino gambling can be difficult, but usually, you're betting on sports, so it makes more sense to focus the campaign on something you can actually gamble on. I don't think you can gamble on hay fever. I could be wrong. So yeah, that one's a bit too far. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty creative. We would all agree that's gone too far. That's not relevant. Congrats there.
Okay, Mark, so what are you seeing most agencies get wrong then currently with digital PR? Anyone that is worth their salt in the digital PR space should be signed up to your newsletter. You send out great tips on a regular basis, but are you seeing stuff specifically which you think people are getting wrong, which I could be doing better?
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier, but I think it's just thinking about why you're doing things, whether that's why on kind of the idea, like why this idea kind of for the campaign, or why am I writing my press release this way and not that way? Why am I sending it to this journalist and not that journalist? I think if you're able to kind of figure out why you're doing those things, I think you're gonna see your results improve for sure. A lot of the time I'm getting people come to me and be like, hey, sent this campaign out and it just didn't work. Like, can you please help me? And very often I'll just take a look at the press release, and this is a common thing that I see, and I just don't understand what it is. And maybe I've got to read like a paragraph like 2 or 3 times before I'm like, okay, I understand now. I get what the campaign is, but I've had the luxury of sitting there and reading that paragraph like 2 or 3 times to get what it is. If you're a journalist and you've got seconds to read what someone sent across to you, you don't have that luxury. So unless they're going to get it instantly, you could say goodbye to the chance of that story getting coverage. So I think it is just simplifying what it is that you're trying to say. Yeah, just making the job for journalists easier, really. That's all it kind of comes down to. Sometimes when it's kind of sending it to journalists, maybe someone's got like, a business kind of financy type story, so they send it out. But there's different types of journalists. They think they've contacted business and finance type journalists and like, oh great, they're going to cover it. But the journalist that works in business or finance at the Financial Times is going to be very different to the one who maybe covers that at the Sun, and maybe the ones at Business Insider. Actually, like some of them just cover literally certain types of companies. So it's just understanding who you're sending it to and why. That's basically all what I can boil everything back down to, just the why. And I think that's something that I try to teach people with my course or kind of with my newsletter. Like, because if you can answer the why, then that's going to improve, make them better at performing, not just now, but kind of for future campaigns as well.
On that point, how targeted do you think people should be, or how personalized, I should say, when they're reaching out to the journalist? If you've got that business finance piece, does it make sense to reach out to all the journalists in that space? And if so, I'm guessing that's going to depend on what your campaign is, but if so, do you need to tweak your pitch to specifically target that person?
I think it depends a little bit. I don't often personalize mine an awful lot. I think I will just do what I'll do a general kind of press release, and maybe I'll tweak it a little bit depending on what it is that they write about. Because what I'm trying to do first and foremost is just kind of catch their attention. So maybe I've got a business or finance piece and it's just kind of general about lots of different companies. But if I notice that a journalist just covers like Amazon or something like that, maybe I'll make sure I throw the word Amazon in the subject line or something like that, where it still makes sense, but just to really kind of catch their attention so that they think that, oh, okay, this story is going to be suited for me because it's got that keyword in. They know obviously write about Amazon. Maybe, again, not the best example, but maybe an idea of how I would tweak that just kind of a little bit.
That's cool. So we want to basically be really, really conveying what the story is as clearly and as quickly as possible when it hits the journalist's inbox. And we want to be as hyper targeted with the journalist's inbox that we're hitting. So if it's a puff piece, finance piece, it's probably not going to resonate with the Financial Times lead finance journalist. So another thing which I'm interested in is how successful are your campaigns based on pre-existing or long-term journalistic relationships based on fresh media lists that you've built for a given campaign?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't really track that kind of stuff. I think I've got quite a good hit rate. I think the reason that I do is because I'm quite choosy with what I'll go out with. If someone comes to me, I'll give you an example. Someone came to me and I did a campaign for them, and it was just a one-off project and it worked. And I was happy to work with them on that because I had a high kind of confidence that it would work. But then they kind of came back to me for another project, and I wasn't sure if I was able to, on a project basis, do something for them where I kind of thought it would work. Like, I just hate the idea of taking someone's money and them just getting nothing in return. So I declined that. So I think I have a high success rate because of that. It would have been a little bit different if it was like a retainer-based project, because it doesn't matter so much if you fail them, because you can make up for that within, if it's a retainer on 6 months or kind of a year, you can keep going with some other stuff and, see some kind of success. But I guess my answer there probably isn't awfully, helpful. But what I would say is it's definitely got a lot harder, like over the years. I remember maybe back in 2019, 2020, I could do something and an average campaign would maybe get, wouldn't be kind of strange to kind of get 10 pieces of coverage relatively quickly. And now that's reduced kind of quite substantially. And I thought, oh, maybe it's me. Like, maybe I've just got worse. But I'm pretty sure I haven't got worse. If anything, I'm improving as time's gone on. So that's going to have been down to like other factors. And I think it's just the landscape that we're in now, whether it's, the media landscape, whether it's more people kind of doing PR or digital PR or fewer journalists as well. Like, I'm guessing those things have maybe kind of, played into that. And it's got more difficult over the years, for sure.
Is there a strategy that you prefer that's working better now, or do you still use all the different strategies?
I think I'm open to using kind of different types of strategies. I think the one that I personally like to do now is like reactive kind of PR. And when I say reactive, I mean stuff that you don't know that's going to happen. So like I spoke earlier about, if the weather kind of changes, you can kind of prepare for that in advance. That's going to happen, and then you can just send it out. But I mean, things that are just totally unprepared, whether that's kind of like, a business that's just gone bankrupt, or announced that they're making layoffs, or maybe some kind of like travel problem that was unforeseen, and just kind of reacting to that and doing maybe some kind of newsjacking around that. And the reason why I like that is because I'm just going back to what I mentioned earlier, is like, I don't want to be doing what everyone else is doing. And I think that there are fewer people doing that kind of stuff because you can't plan for it. This is not a campaign where I can be like, right, we're going to go out with that next month. Like Christmas, everyone's going to be doing a Christmas campaign. Weirdly enough, it becomes much harder to kind of get coverage at Christmas because everyone is doing it. So I want to be doing stuff that other people aren't doing, and with kind of like true like reactive PR where you do have to be super quick, that automatically eliminates a lot of the competition just because they're not going to be fast enough. So that's something that I like to do more of. Yeah, I'm open to kind of doing anything really.
Yeah, well, we love that sort of campaign as well, and it works. You can get a sense if you have a good idea quickly, and I mean really quickly, and you can get it out. It's like you've got that gut feeling. Whereas, you could have the best campaign in the world that's to do with Halloween, but everybody else has got that in their calendars. They've been working on it for ages, and you're just going up against so many more people. It's like everybody has got a lottery ticket, whereas this, it's like it's a raffle. There's just a few people that may be off the mark fast enough, and if it's a good piece and you send it to the right journalist, you've got a really high chance of winning. So yeah, I love that.
Exactly, I feel the same. And it's kind of strange when you do that kind of stuff as well, because I almost sense the desperation on the sides of the journalist. Like I sent one out before, and like very quickly got a response from a Daily Mail journalist being like, oh, thank you. And I felt like they really needed some kind of content. And, that's the first time where, I felt like they've appreciated that. Whereas sometimes with campaign-based stuff, actually more often than not, they'll just cover it, but they won't tell you. You just have no idea. Yeah, with kind of the reactive stuff, it's a lot higher response. Like, oh, thank you so much for this kind of thing. Yeah, I could sense that they needed that.
That's nice.
It definitely feels like you're helping them do their job. If it's something breaking, they have to cover it. So that's something they have to stop whatever they had planned, and they've got to do it. So if you do the work for them, that makes sense that they would be more appreciative there.
Mark, where do you see the future of digital PR going?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that I've been kind of thinking about really, but the main thing that I've been thinking is around AI, right? I mean, I think content has become cheap, and, it's become a bit of a problem for Google, with the helpful content update and things like that. And I think on that side of things, users are going to want content that's produced by humans. And I think that's what Google is going to aim to show. On the PR side, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe journalists kind of fighting back with AI. And what I mean by that is I know that journalists are getting tons and tons of pitches with the kind of just pure garbage, or maybe AI kind of created or generated. But I'm just very surprised that journalists haven't kind of got some filtering system in place that's using AI, where you could just write, I am a journalist and I write about these topics. If an email comes through that isn't about these topics, like if an external email comes through that isn't about these topics, please send them to this other folder or something like that. Journalists are always kind of complaining that they're getting irrelevant pitches. And, I sympathize with that. But at the same time, maybe there's something that they could be doing on their side to reduce that, to make sure that they are kind of getting better quality pitches.
Is that more the issue that you're hearing then, is the irrelevancy, as opposed to they could be sent 1,000 pitches that are relevant, but just mass produced garbage content from ChatGPT, even though it's relevant?
I don't know. I think probably they're getting too many. I think it's probably a combination of both, probably too many, and also just a lot of irrelevant stuff in there as well. And I think I understand why. I mean, if you work in PR, you might be tempted to just send an email to everyone, because you're probably thinking the more people that see this, the more chance I have of getting coverage. And you might think that, hey, there's plenty of upside here and kind of very little downside. And to be honest, you might annoy a few journalists, but maybe there is kind of little downside to that at the moment. But I wouldn't be surprised to kind of see that change in the future as journalists do, hopefully, I'm hoping for them, become more wise to, filtering abilities, maybe within the emails function itself, or maybe using AI or something, just to clean their inbox a little bit. But yeah, also what changes do I think are happening with kind of PR? I think KPIs, I think we have kind of seen a boom, and I think that link targets as KPIs have been a little bit of a tricky one, because I guess the problem with that is that a lot of the time, if the KPI is something like, 20 links, when that's your KPI, it's very tempting for an agency or whoever's doing the work to just kind of go out and get the easiest pieces of coverage, the ones that require maybe kind of like a lower threshold. So, if the KPI is 20, you could go out and get those on like regional websites, which a lot of them might be syndicated coverage. And according to that KPI that's in place, that would be the same. Those 20 regional pieces would be the same as maybe 20 pieces on the BBC and, Sky News. You're kind of treating all of the publications the same there. And no, I find that a little bit kind of strange. And I think that there's maybe a maturity that's going to happen within the industry, where people realize it's not about quantity and it is about quality. And I think we're slowly going to see clients maybe get a little bit more choosy about where they want to be placed. Like, great that you've got like a regional publication or whatever, but that shouldn't be treated as the same as a link on the BBC or on Sky. So I think that might be another area that we may potentially see some changes.
Yeah, I think you need some other metric. You do need minimum metrics for what you count as a link. I know some agencies, you'll look at like the link reports on LinkedIn, and it's like there's the original link and you see a list of syndicated links under it. It's surprising that they bill for that. We don't do that, of course, but I think a lot of clients will start to kind of figure that out and not want to pay for that. Okay, Mark, as we wrap up, my last question is about people getting started in digital PR. So there's been a large interest, a lot of new people entering the space. You've got your training course, which is great. We've actually put several of our team members through it. But what advice would you give to people who are just starting out in digital PR for getting their foot in the door?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that if you want to get better at, for example, kind of coming up with ideas, your outputs are only going to be as good as your inputs. And what I mean by that is you need to be kind of consuming a lot of content and things that work. And that's going to, inspiration can kind of come from anywhere. And I think good places to kind of make sure you do that in a maybe more productive way. There are a couple of newsletters. So one of them is The Grapevine by Iona, and the other one is the PR Insider by Thea. They're always sharing campaigns that they've seen and they've spotted, out in the wild that have kind of worked. I think that can be a good place to kind of start, get a feel for what's working. And then the other thing really is, I guess I would say storytelling. When I say storytelling, what I really think that comes down to is essentially like psychology and copywriting. I think those two together is what makes kind of good, story writing. Yeah, I think that those would be the main things that I would say, yeah.
That's awesome. Mark, this has been wonderful. If people want to find you, and they should most definitely sign up to your newsletter as well, where can they do that?
Yeah, so you can just Google Mark Rofe and maybe a digital PR newsletter. Just don't go on Google Images. They're horrible images of me on Google. You don't want to look at that.
They'll be there forever, my friend.
You find my Twitter or kind of my newsletter anywhere. Maybe my LinkedIn. I am on TikTok as well. I'm not on MySpace or anything like that. But yeah.
I like your suggestion to search your name. Work on that branded search.
I didn't do that intentionally, but I'm going to claim that I did now. Yeah. I'm
there you go.
all about improving my personal branding search terms. Yeah.
All right, Mark, it's been great. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode of Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify. Big thanks to our parent company, Linkify, the wizards behind turning ambitious businesses into standout brands. Hit up our website at linkify.io and take the first steps towards brand greatness. Big shout out to Fame for making this podcast possible. Thanks for listening, folks. Stick around for more insights in our next episode. Catch you later.